Let's be honest, parenting can be messy and hard, but also so rewarding. In this podcast, we'll share all the ups and downs of parenthood, as well as share some of our favorite tips and tricks for parenting using both our experiences and expertise from our professional lives as a speech and language pathologist and teacher, but also our everyday lives as moms, just trying to balance it all. We're so glad you could join us.
Hi, welcome to this week's episode of Then We Had Kids. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Sheena.
We are so happy to have you listening this week. And to be honest, I'm gonna kind of start with not our topic. I'm not gonna jump right in, but I am gonna share that, we had planned to record this episode actually earlier this week, and we had to reschedule, which is totally fine. This is why I love what we get to do with that flexibility. But the day that we were supposed to record was a tough day for me, and really tough day for mommy, I should say. Tough day for being a mom, tough day for being consistent, tough day with showing that gentle love, and really for no reason. Like nothing bad happened. My kids were actually relatively good. It just felt like one of those days that I didn't want to go around cleaning up the same toys that I'd already cleaned up that day. I didn't really
over again.
Over and over. It's a day where I don't have anything scheduled. So my oldest doesn't have school that day. She doesn't have her other activity. I don't have her signed up for too much, which normally works out fine. I kind of like having a day of just the two kids. But this day I just would have loved to have something to do. And so it made, if you listen to our earlier episode about co-regulation, it made it really difficult to stick with those strategies. I find myself like losing it really quickly on them, really for no reason. I mean, it might have been like something that I could have had patience for forever, but it just was a day that was hard. And it just was.
Yep. I mean, so we had a similar situation Monday night, trying to get the boys out the door for swim lessons. And it was funny because I also, this week has not been great. I am at the tail end now of a sinus infection, but that I wasn't feeling well at the beginning of the week and, wanted to reschedule. And so because I wasn't feeling well, had my mother-in-law and my husband take the boys to swimming and just trying to get them out the door. And it was funny because both my mother-in-law and husband had listened to our last episode and just pointed out how dysregulated I was and wanted to,
helpful and not
helpful
to
utilize my coping strategies. But yeah, it's just been a rough week.
Yeah. And I would say getting out the door should be like an Olympic event.
Oh my God.
It's just,
but here's the thing. I wouldn't win.
I don't know how you would decipher like what's winning and what's losing for that, but
I don't feel like whatever is happening in my household when we're trying to get out the door, I for sure am not winning.
Right. But it's just like all of a sudden, like time is lost. And even though you had all the time to repair, it's the most stressful time to get to something that's even like fun. But
right.
Yeah. So it just is one of those days.
Or for us, it's like literally right around the block. It's not like
we're not even going far. Yeah. But it was one of those days. And I was, thinking back of like all the strategies, like, why don't I like go do something for myself or like read a book or numerous options. I was having zero of them. I didn't want to do any of them. And then then you like start to spiral of like, I just need to get through this day. And then my thought goes, you should really be grateful for the days you have with your children, right? Like how, like you can't just get through the day, you have to enjoy it. And they're only this little for so long. So then it's like this vicious cycle of like my mind being like, you're not in a good place. You better get in a better place. I can't get in a better place. Why are you in a worse place now? So it was just like, all right, you know what? I am just going to get through the day. It's bedtime. They're done. I'm done. And then the next day I did see a quote somewhere as I was scrolling through social media that said like, don't let the bad days trick you to thinking that you're a bad mom. And
oh, that's nice.
Yeah. And so that one was like, all right. Yeah. That one was just, and again, no real reason. I can't say like my oldest was being a pistol or my youngest one was doing this, it just was a hard day. And I keep saying that just because it is and it happens.
Yeah. And we're all going through similar things. And I think one of, kind of diving into our topic, we wanted to talk today about building emotional vocabulary. And
Yes.
to do that, you have to feel those emotions and
Hmm.
recognize those emotions. And we to teach it in our kids, we have to do it ourselves, right?
And I had that in the back of my mind as well. And I was thinking numerous times, like, how poorly of a job I'm doing at communicating my feelings as adult in my 30s, right? Like, and then I was trying to think of examples. I'm like, there are so many times like my husband or like my mom or somebody will ask me how I'm doing, and I go, I'm fine. I'm not fine. There are like so many emotions that I'm feeling, and I just
Right.
can't find the best way to articulate it. And so, yes, our topic today is about building emotional vocabulary and helping our kids not only know those words, but know what it feels like in themselves and know what it looks like and potentially feels like for somebody else that they're interacting with.
Yeah. And knowing, and we'll talk about this more, but knowing that there are no bad feelings or bad emotions.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yes, it's really important to know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like we said, if you tuned in last week, you kind of got a great idea of what co-regulation is. So, helping our kids manage their emotions together with us as their adult in their life. And it's so key to build their emotional vocabulary because we can't expect them to regulate their emotions if they don't know about them. Um, and so, like we said, knowing the names and how it feels is essential. And going back, I'm going to kind of take it back a little bit further, is that when we think about, communication, me as a speech pathologist, communication, when we interact with people, so much of it is nonverbal. So that means like
Yes.
facial expressions, eye contact, body language, all of those clues to how somebody's feeling, what they're thinking. And so we're just helping our kids become like little social, I'm going to use the term from social thinking, which we'll eventually talk about, but they're becoming social detectives. So we're helping them build those skills so that they can then build friendships, they can build relationships, they can build empathy. There is so much to benefit from having a good emotional vocabulary and understanding.
Yeah. And just being able to advocate for themselves then, right? Like
Yes.
self-advocacy, I think is so huge. Um, to be able to say, here's what I need and why I need it, or be okay asking for help.
And going back to my example, like we still, or I should say, I still struggle with that as an adult, right? And when I think about how I grew up, I didn't really like talk about those like quote unquote negative or bad emotions very often. It was like a lot about the positives and building that up. And if there ever was a time that I was experiencing a negative emotion, it was one of those where you just like kind of get through it and then let it pass. And time went on. And it wasn't until like my husband who talked more openly about his emotions actually that he wouldn't let
Really?
me. Yes, like growing like in college, and obviously we met in high school, but in college and as like young adults, but pre-kids, he really wouldn't let it slide if I just said I'm fine. Like he would kind of like I'd have to like get to like a little uncomfortable phase
Yeah.
to talk about what I was feeling.
Like
So
dig
he was
deeper.
the yeah, and so he was the one who really helped me feel more confident of discussing those negative emotions, that it really wasn't a personal thing.
Yeah.
But that is something that is really helpful and healthy to talk about.
It's interesting too, because for the listeners that don't know me in my personal life, I am half Korean.
Mhm.
And I obviously can't speak to every Korean or every Asian's upbringing and what their home life was like. But my experience was we didn't talk about emotions.
You're
My
right, right.
family was very just stoic. We got through the day. We did our work. Um, and it's not like it was a negative thing. It's just we it wasn't something we talked about.
I think it's things of just like generational differences and growth. So like similarly, like my parents, like I could tell when my dad or somebody was upset, but it's not like we had like a full conversation about it. It was just like this understanding
Right.
of maybe something that's going on, and we let somebody kind of deal with it on their own till they
Like,
came back to a place. And
yeah,
then, like you said, you kind of just like move on.
right.
Whereas now we know so much about like emotions and the positive aspects that it brings to kids. Like we ask them to do these things as they go into school age. We're like, hey, can you relate this to this character's perspectives, or can you write a persuasive essay? So we're asking kids to build on these skills, and we can help them with the building blocks of this as young as like babies, right?
Yep.
So it's just like a really key skill that we can provide our children.
And it's one that will help them grow with their relationships with, in school and even just long term, right? Like kids who have self regulation skills, kids who are able to articulate how they're feeling and articulate their wants and needs are going to see long term benefits in terms of their own mental health and social emotional well being. So it's just like the we're trying to teach it to them now so that they can build on these skills and be successful as adults.
Right. And be good humans. I feel like when
Ah,
I think about what
yes.
I want my kids to be when they're older, I want them to be like kind, good people. Right.
Yep.
And so this is a great way to do that, or it's a piece of that puzzle of who they're going to be when they're adults. And I also hope that the more I'm open to talking about emotions with them now, that, the good and the not so good will lead my kids to be open about their emotions, not only with like their friends and their future colleagues, but also with me. Like I would love for when they're older, it's like we can have these open conversations and maybe have difficult conversations around what's going on, and they're comfortable with that because they have a good understanding of what's going on with them.
Yeah. And that actually, it just triggered a thought into my head when you were talking about like not just doing well, but like being a good human, right?
Yeah.
So at my undergrad university, we had this amazing president at the time I started, and he would walk through the campus. You would always see him. He'd be holding his violin. He had this just like crazy shaggy hair. His name was Minor Myers Jr. And he actually has a really well known quote that's go into the world and do well, but more importantly, go into the world and do good.
I love it.
It's an amazing quote. I think he was an amazing man. I feel very blessed that he was still there when I started out at at my university. But it just made me think of that quote.
That's a good one. I think that's very fitting to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Um, and again, I think when we talk about these topics, so we're bringing it up, and we're going to talk about this. It'll come up in other episodes, because it's one where sometimes it feels so simple, or it feels like often our kids should just get it, right? Like they should just know what to do, or know what to say, or
Use
know
your
how to
words,
communicate
Jenny.
with us.
Use
Yeah,
your
use your
words.
words. Exactly. My husband did quote, he said, I heard you the other day, you said, use your words to our daughter. And then I gave her the like statement of what she could say. He's like,
Yeah.
I heard you say that. So that's funny. But yeah, we think it's just like these innate skills. And so often our kids actually have to be taught what to do,
Yep.
how to do things, what to say, what things are, how they fit to different situations. And so yeah, I think that's why sometimes it feels so simple in nature, but it's actually quite complex.
Yeah.
Soon we'll get to talking about how to build and different strategies of building emotional vocabulary. But first, it can be helpful to think about emotions being broken down into 3 stages. So first, babies, they notice emotions. They are cooing, they're crying. We are supporting them with self-soothing, whether we are swaddling them, trying different pacifiers. And so that is them getting their emotional development from the get-go. And then as they start to get older, we see our toddlers start to express emotions, and that can be through anything from drawing a lovely picture of the family to throwing a tantrum,
Yep.
right? Like all of that is them communicating what they're feeling. This is often where like we struggle as parents and our kids to connect because they're experiencing such complex emotions, but haven't figured out how to efficiently, effectively communicate that. So like that's where often we're like butt heads. Like if you can just tell me how you feel, or don't feel that way, or don't do this, don't do that. That's where like that back and forth, and where co-regulation really comes into play
Yep.
is this stage here. And I would say there's so many times where like I find myself saying like, don't, stop, no, like those words. And if I'm not in a good place, that's what my go-to is, and it's not super helpful.
Yeah.
But those words lose their effectiveness and their power, right? So we can't expect to just keep saying stop or don't without then providing like a teaching moment to see a
Right.
shift in behavior.
And I think something I often point out to school staff when I'm doing trainings or coaching around behavior regulation and social emotional well-being is, don't tell them what you want them to stop doing. Tell them what you want them to start doing, because then it shifts it and focuses it more on the positive of what you want them to do instead of
Totally.
what you need them to stop doing.
Totally. So that stage, I think that's where, I would think a lot of our listeners would really benefit from. And that's we're in the thick of
Yeah.
this like expressing emotion stage. And then that last one of managing emotion. So giving the strategies, validating how kids are feeling. So those are the 3 stages that I find helpful to think about that emotion development.
And I think remembering too that their emotional vocabulary will start to develop the older they get and the more exposed they are to different vocabulary, right? So
Yes.
to say that I'm irate is not something I would expect my toddler to say. Right.
What do you
So
mean?
it's
Of
like,
course it
how
is.
can you teach them? I mean, maybe. How can you teach them some of those basic vocabularies when they're younger and teach them
Mhm.
then slowly as they're getting older how to really just fine tune that vocabulary a little bit more, which will then
Right.
just articulate better how they're feeling and what they need.
Totally. Yeah. So going to those basic emotion words, there's happy, sad,
Yep.
scared, mad. I'd say those are like the 4 when I think of basic emotion words, and anything kind of be like a gradient of that.
Right. Because like if you think of a visual thermometer,
Which we used a lot in school, in the school setting, right?
right.
And I
Yeah.
know you probably do still do, or you
Yeah.
see some degree of emotion intensity.
Right. There's like a huge spectrum of feeling mad.
Yeah.
There's a
You could
huge spectrum
be,
of feeling happy. Like you could just be content.
yes, you could be,
So,
yeah, content, calm, good, excited, fine, ecstatic. You could be disappointed, frustrated, annoyed, mad, irate. There are so many emotion words out there. So, like, also knowing where to start, thinking about those basic emotion words, and then maybe, like, if you think of like a step above it. So, not going from mad to irate, mad to like frustrated, and thinking about what
right.
emotion words are the most functional for our kids.
Yep.
At this, thinking about, and when I say kids, I'm thinking about our toddler stage. So anywhere from like, and almost our 1.5-year-olds, I'm talking to him about emotions he's not telling me, and he doesn't have the expressive vocabulary yet, but he's starting to understand things more. And also with our 3-year-olds,
Yeah.
I know that ours can get a better understanding as they're experiencing more with us. They're experiencing more in schools, just a lot more social interactions as they get older.
And I think we should also point out, obviously, given our backgrounds, that this is also something that we do not only with our kids at home, but with students of all ages and all, you know, with students with
Learning.
diverse needs, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So we have students who may have some more communication challenges and may use a communication device to
Yes.
articulate their wants and needs. Um,
Which
these
doesn't lessen
strategies,
the importance of teaching them
ab-
emotional vocabulary.
absolutely,
Right. Right.
but these strategies can really be used with anyone, right? We can adapt these strategies for any child, no matter where they're at in terms of their learning needs.
Yeah. And it's important that kids of all learning needs learn this stuff.
Yep.
Because like we said earlier, it has such a profound impact on even adulthood. When
Yeah.
you think about what's important and what people are looking for in employees, they're looking for people with good intelligent or good emotional intelligence.
Yep.
That's like such a key factor. So like we said, going back to building that vocabulary, wanting to start with those basic emotion words and thinking about what building blocks can you use of a functional emotional vocabulary. And you said earlier, Sheena, really stressing this, that there are no bad emotions. I think I mentioned this in the earlier episode, is that often anger and being mad is one where we can easily scoot our kids away from and say, no, you don't want to like, don't do that, but we don't. As adults, we experience those emotions all the time. We
Right.
feel mad, we feel frustrated, we feel annoyed, we feel angry. It's how we can manage that, but
Yep.
we still experience it. We can't have that expectation that our kids shouldn't experience any of those quote unquote negative emotions or
Right.
uncomfortable emotions.
And I think it's also about how, like, what do we do with those emotions? Like you said, how can we regulate ourselves, but also how do we express them, right? Because if there's a larger impact on others, if we're feeling really mad and we're throwing things that could hurt someone or break something, that's where we need to kind of bring that in a little bit, but we don't want them to stop feeling how they're feeling. It's
Yes,
just teaching them more appropriate ways to express those emotions.
exactly. So matching emotions with appropriate situations, and then with that, appropriate responses.
Yep.
And we'll get into a lot of like social thinking, perspective taking in future episodes. But yeah, really recognizing that what we do, how we act, what we say has an impact on the thoughts and feelings of those around us. And so it's key that we don't shy away or we don't minimize those emotions, but rather help our kids figure out what to do with them.
Yep.
And there are honestly lots of ways of supporting emotional vocabulary. One I love is I find myself a lot. I'm with my two kids for the majority of the day during the week. I am self-narrating my life almost always. And so it's great for multiple reasons. One, they're listening to lots of language being spoken. They, even simple things like, I'm going to do the dishes now. I'm rinsing off this plate. I'm going to put it in the dishwasher. Mundane kind of adult activities are learning opportunities.
Yeah.
And so, and then I might say something like, I'm looking forward to whatever we might have next. I'm feeling excited to be with you guys, then go play with blocks or whatever the case may be. So really just talking out loud how you're feeling. Or if I was in a better place to do this the other day, I could have said something like, I'm feeling really down or I'm feeling a little sad and I don't really know why, but I'm going to go read a book. Or would you like to come read a book with me? Maybe get them involved to help me a little bit more. Like I said, I didn't do that. And so we can't expect ourselves to be perfect all the time or even perfect at all. So, but I do find that narrating what I'm doing is really helpful. And I find
Yeah.
myself, it really opens up a lot of doors for leading to building language, to building emotions, like where can I fit things in? So
And I
I
think
really recommend that.
to go with that one too is you can add like feelings check-ins throughout your day. So just make it part of your daily routine, right? Like you're sitting there and everyone's eating breakfast, or you're eating together at the dinner table, like just do a check-in. How are you feeling? Right? Especially if you start to see some of those emotions starting to bubble up, right? Before you get to that zone where that we talked about with the last episode, right? Like you can't teach them if you can't reach them. So you want to think about where they are in terms of that emotional escalation continuum and where in relation that rational thought is. But if you can start to see it bubbling up, to start doing some of those feeling check-ins, right? If I'm noticing my toddler he really loves puzzles, which like mother, like son. But when there's like maybe a piece he can't figure out, or maybe it's a brand new puzzle that has too many pieces for him to navigate, you can see him starting to get frustrated. So, stopping him to say, how are you feeling? Or it looks like you're feeling
Yeah.
frustrated.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You're right. If you can catch them with those not so great emotions. I don't love saying negative emotions. I wish I had a better term for it, but that's what I'm going to go with since I've said it. But yeah, those negative emotions, like those are teaching moments before you lose them. And
Yep.
so you now as the parent are the detective in that situation where you're starting to look for those signs, to be able to talk them through how they're feeling, pointing it out, maybe pointing out some body cues too, if like it looks like your face is really tense, or
Right.
you can kind of like make the facial expression that they're making. You're like, this is what your face look, this is what I see right now. Or like
You're
their
making
fists are really
fists,
tight.
right?
Yeah. Oh, that noise you made, as I so nicely spoke about my daughter's noise, and she still does it. It's like her tell. Um,
Or you're
and
roaring like
so
a dinosaur.
yeah.
It looks
So
like you're
being
mad.
able, yeah. So those moments, we can, it's, you have this like window. It sometimes is so small of an opening, but if you can catch it, it's great to be able to use that as it looks like you're feeling,
Yeah.
insert whatever feeling word you're wanting to build on, or wanting them to really know and understand.
Yep. What are some of your favorite strategies or teaching tools for when you were an SLP at the school?
Ooh, I, there were a lot. I would say I loved books. I did also love using pictures of people. Cartoons and drawings like that are great. I would just love for the kids that we worked with to see, like the human face, the human body, and
Hmm.
and we would make comparisons to cartoons and things like that. But there was a lot of, if we were playing a game, I might exaggerate my emotions so that they could really get those clues from me.
Right.
Maybe a little bit more dramatic than what I would do, but just that they could really tune in to my emotions. We used a lot of, I had a big mirror in my office. And so we would make faces in the mirror. Like we would pull out different emotions, and I used a lot of pictures because we had some non-readers at the time and it really wasn't about the reading task. And so we would make faces, and we would often play like a matching game with our faces, to match up. And then we would talk about when we would feel that way. And so we'd come up with, or it would be vice versa. We would be given a scenario of like someone gave you a gift for your birthday and you really liked it. What kind of face you make? Someone gave you a gift for your birthday, but it's not really what you wanted. And so we would kind of do both of those.
Yeah.
Um, I would often do social skills groups. So it would be myself and a therapist, and we would have maybe like 2 or 3 kids. So it was a lot of working in a group to recognize. So, and if something was happening, so if we were playing a game and a student wasn't kind of tuning into what the others were doing, like we would pause and point out and kind of make like a big deal about what was going on. And when I say big deal, I mean we stopped what we were doing because the key was to tune into all the other kids in the social skills group.
Yeah.
How about you?
Um, I think the one that I always loved, and I think you actually would come into my classroom a few times to do this, was using Pixar shorts.
I love Pixar shorts. Yes, yes,
Because
yes.
there's most of them I think have no language or talking. Maybe some of them have like
Mm,
very little,
yeah.
but it really just allows the child to focus on the character's facial expressions, their body language to try to interpret their feelings. And then you
Hmm.
take it the step further for them to like kind of take the perspective of that character. Like, why do you think so and so is feeling that way?
Yeah. We would do with those as well, like a feelings tracker. And so we would we would have that thermometer visual you talked about. And as that Pixar short, which, they're just a couple minutes long, I would pause it at different points and like have kids kind of put on the thermometer where you think the character's feeling. And so even in a 3 minute span, the kids could then, as they connected their dots, get a visual that the character's emotions went up and down and they didn't stay with one emotion.
Yep.
Um, that they experience and quite a few emotions in just a few minutes.
Right. Inside Out is another great movie to help teach emotions, right? It really focuses on the fact that you can experience more than one emotion at any time or in any given situation. So that's another cute option out there.
Yeah, I would say, when I was working, obviously trying to stay away from videos, but in my home, other than the Pixar shorts, and by videos, I mean like watching Disney Plus. So with my kids now, with the 3 movies that we have on repeat in our household, um, it- it's just mom life is that we'll talk a lot about what the characters are feeling and how do we know. And my daughter will, whatever movie we're watching or she's into, she like takes on the persona of the characters or at least one of the character.
She's amazing.
So
I'm going to sidetrack us real quick.
yes.
So around the holidays, our group of friends hosts a happy Festivus party, knowing that some of us celebrate Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever it may be. We had to obviously reschedule this year given COVID and just other barriers. So we just recently had it, and your daughter, so Disney Plus, she asked me to put on Encanto, and Sheedy, can you fast forward when really she wanted me to rewind, but she was just so sweet about it. And my boys aren't into Disney. So I
Yeah.
just gladly obliged every request she gave me.
Oh, I mean, bless her sweetheart. She does ask very nicely for lots of things. But yeah, so she's really right now it is Encanto. So if you haven't seen it, you should. Um, and she is the character Isabel, or no, she's oh my God, Louisa. Sorry.
Yep.
So she really loves Louisa. She loves the song that Louisa sings. All the songs are great. Um, and that movie, along with lots of other Disney movies, but this one I think is obviously I've seen it so many times it's stuck in my head. There's so many great opportunities for teaching emotions and like what people are really feeling. Why are they feeling that way? So I think it's also taking whatever interest your kid has
Yeah.
and how can you tie this in. I mean, like Thomas the Tank Engine. I mean, he's a train, but he has emotions, right? Like, so it's finding the how can you get them hooked in to then talking about these things so it's not just like, hey, we're going to sit down and have this emotion vocabulary building session. You're tying it into what they're experiencing and what they enjoy.
Yeah.
But yes, Encanto is quite incredible. And I now have to do my daughter's hair in like a bun and she found a red ribbon. So if you haven't
Oh my
seen Encanto and
gosh.
then you'll understand what my daily morning routine is for my child. Oh, but yeah, so we also will do there's a lot of games out there that are helpful. I mean, um we do charades. I know like that's like a fun game you can do again if your child isn't reading. If they're younger, you can have pictures of different emotions. And then you can do like picture matching of emotions as well. I mean, I love books and my daughter really loves books. So she can sit down and like look at a book for a good amount of time.
Yeah.
And there are books that are specific for teaching emotions. And then obviously in any book, characters are experiencing conflict and
Yeah.
resolution.
I
So
feel
there's
like you can
in any
use
book,
any
you could
book to
talk
teach this
about
stuff.
how they're feeling, what's going on, what changed, how are they feeling now, how might they feel at the end. So it's just being a little bit savvy of how you can fit it in with what you're already doing during the day.
Yeah. And then I think as kids start to get older, something that we did a lot with students and that you can do with some of your older children is to teach them I statements, right? So I feel blank, so label that emotion because or when. So you're teaching them to identify like what it is or why they're feeling that way. And then I want or I need blank. And that's just, again, getting back to that self advocacy piece of being able to advocate for your wants and your needs.
I think that's really huge. The I feel statements are key instead of them learning like you're making me feel this way and you know
Right.
like
It's
that
less about
like
pointing
point the
fingers.
finger,
Mhm.
right?
And
Saying
it's
that,
really just kind of owning how you feel, which I
yeah,
think there are probably adults out there that still struggle with this, right? So it's this is a
true.
strategy that while I'm saying yes, teach it to your older kids, this is a strategy that works for us as adults.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly. And a lot of this then can go back to if your kids are starting to feel or they're starting to become dysregulated, you then can tie in those strategies of regulating, whether you're looking at a wonder wand, whether you're taking a deep breath, whether you're having a moment in like a cozy corner, whether you're gonna sing a song or count to 10, like you can then tie these two pieces together. Again, it comes back to that I feel like it looks like you're feeling, or when your kids are older, like I'm feeling mad, I need a break, or it
right,
looks like you're feeling frustrated, why don't you ask for help or some
right.
like
So
tying
tying
those
in that,
two together.
yeah,
Yes.
tying in those regulation skills. And it can even like it can also be after the fact, right? Like first get them regulated and then you can say it, let's talk about this. It looked like you were feeling like, am I right? Because there are going to be times where we're not right.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Where you
that's
might be
okay
like, it
too.
looks like you're feeling mad. I'm not.
Right.
Okay. You're not mad. Yeah. But as they can become better able to communicate what they're feeling, it might not be mad. It might be that your kids are feeling disappointed or worried
Right.
or something else underneath. So they can become better able and you guys can then like communicate what's going on and figure out whether something needs to be done or changed. Again, that's for a little bit older kids. But for right now, for these toddlers, it's really about building that vocabulary, building up their understanding, being comfortable with those not
Uncomfortable
so great,
feelings.
yeah, not so great emotions.
Yeah.
And knowing that this is a skill, like you had just talked about, that takes practice, practice, practice. And it's not going to be anything that's like set in stone. You're not like, oh, as soon as your kid gets to 6, then
Right.
everything is great with their emotional vocabulary. This is something that you're going to work on as they get older. I mean,
They're
I'm
going to
not
work on
totally looking
as
forward to it as teenager
no,
years,
but they're
but
also going to work on it as adults.
yes, exactly. So if you can find some ways, some different strategies of how to build it and have fun with it, I think that's also key. It gives an opportunity to be a little silly, to maybe play a game you haven't done, or finding just different opportunities to even share how you're feeling throughout that
Yeah.
day. So connecting those dots with them and all the while trying to do it while you're regulated, which is very hard to do.
And it's okay if we get dysregulated, right? Like some of that too is just apologizing so that they can see that we're taking ownership of our emotions, our actions, whatever, and then teach them so that they can see like, okay, mom is going through some hard feelings or uncomfortable feelings too. If she can do it, that must mean it's okay for me too, right? So that you're just kind of emphasizing that there are no bad emotions. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all of the latest, you can follow us on Instagram @_, and then we had kids. Thanks again. And like we say, life used to be carefree, and then we had kids.